All right. We have the stream is live. This one is messed up a little bit. Give me one quick second here, guys. Apologies to anyone tuning in. Okay, I think we got it straight. Having all kinds of trouble with one of my lights, but we're going to make it work either way. So, before we get into the show, quick thing, as always, the goal of this show, guys, is to help athletes build their dream careers in sport, help athletes develop and actually reach their true potential, and in turn create the life that they want through the hard work that they're putting into their sport. Now, today we're going to be talking about predicting the future, which seems like a pretty crazy topic, but I'll get into exactly how we're going to do that. My big ask right before we start the show, though, if you're tuning in live, share the live stream out. Make sure that we can help reach more athletes. The goal of this show is to make an impact, and we do that through word of mouth. We do that through you guys sharing it out, telling other people about the show. If you've tuned in before, make sure that you go check out the podcast itself at theelitedevelopmentpodcast.ca. But for now, let's get into the show, and we are talking about predicting the future, and we're going to go in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the #1 show for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponents and build their dream careers in sport. I'm your host, Kenny Dusseault, and today we're talking about predicting the future. Now, more specifically, today we're talking about how you can predict your athletic future. And this is all based off of a quote I heard the other day that really resonated with me, which is the best way to predict your future is to create it. Now, the reason that quote really resonated with me is because obviously on the surface, predicting the future is impossible. I can't tell you exactly where I'm going to be 20 years from now. I can't tell you that I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. Like, we don't know. Obviously, we can hope, we can wonder, we can guess, but we don't know. However, that quote just really reinforced with me the idea that we have the power over our future. Like, when I heard that the best way to predict your future is to create it, I started thinking about myself when I moved to Calgary, which was like 6 years ago now. And I started thinking about, who I was, where I was at in my life. And really unconsciously, I started creating my future. It's like I was moving into a job that paid nothing. I was moving into a city where I knew nobody. I was moving into an apartment that just wow was all I can really say about that. And I just I didn't really have much going for me. And 6 years later, I drive the car that I've wanted since I was like 18 years old. Maybe not quite, because my goal would be a little bit newer one, but it's the 03 I was driving when I got here, so still a pretty solid upgrade. I'm running a business that is bringing in 6 figures of revenue and has athletes in 10 different countries around the world. I own my own gym, which is something I've wanted to do since I was a teenager. Like, day by day by day, I'm creating the future that I wanted forever. And I was doing that even unconsciously. But then it started making me think as well about, okay, it's all well and good that I've created this over the last 6 years, but now what about the next 6 years? Because, I'm doing a lot better now. I'm a lot further along in my career. I'm doing a lot more than I was. What about the next 6 years? What future do I want to create by the time I'm 36 years old? And this is what I want to get into today, is how this can apply to you guys building your careers too. Because honestly, that mentality of creating your own future literally reminds me of every successful person I've ever known and every successful person I've ever spoken to. None of them are sitting around just waiting for a handout. Now, obviously, lottery winners do exist, inheritances and all of that do exist, but people who have built their future themselves and people who have, made their own money, like, they make that money not by accident. They don't end up with, the mansion and the fancy car and all those things by accident. They end up with those lives because of the work and effort they put in. Like, one of my favorite examples would be Conor McGregor. Like, when you look back at him before the UFC, The dude was a plumber for 18 months and like just kind of always was saying like, I'm going to be an athlete. I'm going to be a world champion. I remember seeing a story of his talking about how when he was like 12, 13 years old, he was kicking a soccer ball against the wall and visualizing being in a stadium full of people and having him kicking the winning goal and everybody screaming his name. And like his whole life, think what you want about where he's at right now, but his whole life leading into the UFC double champ and the almost $1 billion, his whole life was created through the actions that he took every day. Like it was strategy, it was thought, it was process. It wasn't just him doing a bunch of random shit in the day and then hoping that it led him down this incredible path. It was him planning it out and then him executing on that plan. And again, that story can be said of so many different athletes, but he's just one who obviously, rose to pretty unbelievable fame. So to look back at his has been a pretty cool experience. Now, the thing I want you guys to really get out of this podcast is how you can start creating your own future. So step one of creating your own future is understanding what that future is, right? Because I speak to so many athletes. Actually, a great example is I'm running a masterclass on Sunday, before this, so this podcast will be out. The masterclass will already be done. But one of the questions that I have on the registration form is, what are your goals for your sport? And so many people answering a question like that, to be the best that I can be, to take it far, to learn as much as I can learn. And that's all well and good. If your goal is to be the best you can be, that's great. But what does that look like? Because that feels like a very murky picture to me. Right? If somebody says, I want to be the best that I can be, I'm kind of going, okay, like, what's your cap? Like, are you, a regional scene, win some, lose some kind of athlete? Are you a full-time pro, but in a lower league, like, one of the lower leagues than the UFC? Are you making it to the UFC? Are you winning UFC championships? Is your career making you millions? Are you getting a job once you're done? Like, what does the best I can be look like? Because I promise you, the guys who make it to the top aren't different than you. But one of the things that'll separate them is if you speak to them, they're getting into the sport with the goal of, I'm going to be at the top of the sport. I am going to win UFC championships. I am going to make millions of dollars. And then they've gone off and they've executed that and made it into reality. They're not coming in saying, oh, I'll try it out and I'll see what I can do. Because having that clear vision on what your future actually is allows you to put together the roadmap of exactly how you're going to achieve it. And that's what a lot of people are missing. Oh yeah, I'm going to train hard and hope I win a bunch of fights. Isn't going to be as conclusive as my goal is to have X amount of fights on the regional scene. Within that time, I also want to bring this person onto my team. And then once I'm, 6-0, my plan is to move up to one of these 4 leagues. And then if I move into one of those 4 leagues, my goal is to win a belt in those leagues, which then can put me into a promotion like the UFC. And then by the age of insert number here, my goal is to be a UFC champion. Now you have a path, right? You can look at that path and you can say, okay, am I on track? Am I behind? Am I ahead? What's going well? What's not? And you can make a much more clear process for yourself in achieving that goal simply by knowing what that goal is, right? But then that also leads into other goals. That also leads into goals outside of the sport and how competing in the sport is going to help you with those goals. Coming back to that Conor McGregor example again, I remember him talking about way back in the day, talking about how he'll be able to comfortably look back on his career when I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like when his parents are living in a mansion and are retired, and his girlfriend has a car for every day of the week, and like his kids are set for life. Like he had those things in his head of like, When I've made that kind of money, that my girlfriend has a car for every day of the week, my parents have a mansion, my kids are all set for life, that's when I know, like, I've done it. So now when he's coming through his career, he's not just thinking win some fights and see how far I can take it. He's thinking gain the platform to be able to build the whiskey brand, to be able to make all of this money in all of these different areas. And he's creating a more clear vision of his future. Now, again, think about Connor what you will with things that are going on now and rumors and stories like that. I'm purely using coming up Connor as the example of what I'm trying to say here. So I hope that makes sense. Now, the next piece of this, guys, is language and mindset. And when I talk about language and mindset, again, a perfect example of what I mean is Conor McGregor. Like, when he was coming up, if you talk to him about winning championships and things like that, he never said if. It was always when I win the championship, when I demolish this opponent. And it was always with certainty, when I make my millions, when I achieve this, when I achieve that, when I bring this home, when I do that. And simply by switching up that language with certainty. Now, again, does only speaking certainly make all of these things come true? Of course not. There's still always those guys that will speak with certainty and then go out and lose. But switching that in your mind, speaking with certainty, and making sure that all of your language is speaking about your goals as if they're already done. You want to be a millionaire through your athletic career? Don't say, I want to be a millionaire one day through my athletic career. Say, I will be a millionaire because of my athletic career. I am going to make $1 million. I am going to win the UFC championship. I am going to achieve X, Y, Z. Because again, just switching up that language, does that mean it's going to happen? Of course not. The action needs to back it up. But when you speak with certainty and then you back it up with the action, that's when you're actually able to achieve these incredible things that you're trying to achieve. This leads me also into the mindset side. Because the language is one thing, but you can say all these things yourself, but if you don't actually believe them internally, that's a whole other problem. So I'll give you an example with myself over the last couple of years. So when I was growing up, my parents are very good people, but they had a very tight money mindset. It was always avoid spending when we can, do whatever we can to save money. They loved to shop with the coupons and do all that stuff, which is fine. But I always found as I grew up, that started affecting my mindset around money as well. When I got into business, I didn't want to reinvest in my business because I didn't want to spend money unless I absolutely had to. But then what I started realizing is that the only way you're going to grow a larger business is by reinvesting into it, by spending money, by hiring mentors, all of these good things that I ended up doing and ended up benefiting greatly from. But that was really tough for me. And so one of the limiting beliefs that I had to get around was my mindset around money. My mindset around money being tight, not wanting to spend, etc., was a tough belief for me to break through. But in order for me to achieve the goals I have for my coaching career, coaching athletes at the highest level, making impact, speaking on stages, getting well known enough to make a global impact on how athletes see strength and conditioning, I need to invest in myself more. And so now every time I get the chance, I invest in myself because I know where it's leading. I know what it's doing for me. But I wasn't able to just flip that switch. So I started going to therapy specifically to learn about that limiting belief that I had around money, figure out where it came from, and figure out systems on how to make sure I'm breaking those limiting beliefs down. And now, I've dropped $40,000 probably this year on mentorship alone. And the reason I've done that is because I've been able to work through that belief. I've been able to work through that limiting belief that, first of all, coaches are just poor all the time. And second of all, that spending money is a bad thing. And because I spent the time, because I spent the money on a therapist to help me work through those things, now I have no problem investing in myself. And because I have no problem investing in myself, my business has never been better. We've over 4x the size of the business in the last 2 years alone. Now, One of the things that is extremely important here when it comes to these limiting beliefs, first of all, is figuring out what they are for you. So for a lot of people, it's plain and simple. They don't see themselves as achieving the goals that they have. You want to be a UFC champion, but when you think about it in your head, you're like, no, there's no way I'm going to become a UFC champion. I don't deserve it. I'm not going to be at that level. There's no way I'll be able to compete with, those guys at the top. And so spending time working on your mindset, hiring a therapist, whatever it is you need to do to start seeing yourself as that person is going to be the next step in creating the future that you want instead of just letting life happen to you. Now, the third and final step, and I've talked about this a little bit, if you want to start creating your future instead of just letting life happen to you, the third and final step is action. You can speak with as much certainty as you want. You can work on your mindset every day, but then if you don't back it up with what you do every day, it's not going to happen, plain and simple. So for myself, with the goals I have for coaching, like I mentioned, I'm not just sitting at home every day working on my mindset. I'm also doing a podcast every single day. I'm also getting up at 4:00 in the morning and working on myself and working on my own physical fitness and making sure that I'm putting myself out there on social media, even when it's uncomfortable, making sure that I'm speaking to athletes on a daily basis. I'm learning about the things that they need and the things that they struggle with and the things that they are worried about when it comes to training so that I can get a better and better understanding of how exactly I can make the impact that I want to make. And also coaching, obviously, my goal is to provide the best possible service to every athlete that I coach, because if I want to make a global impact in the industry, I need to get good results with my athletes, period. Because if I'm not doing well as a coach, then on a bigger scale, no one's going to want to listen to me. So the actions that I take every day are in service of the vision that I have for my future. I love the shit out of all of my athletes, and I focus on getting them the best possible results because I want them to be able to live their dreams, but I also want to be able to continue to make more and more and more impact. And the way that I make more and more and more impact is I have other people coming up to my athletes being like, whoa, what do you do for conditioning and how can I start doing it? And the more and more and more I have people saying that and asking those questions, the more and more I have people following what we're doing. The more I have people following what we're doing, the more people I'm starting to impact with the way they think about strength and conditioning, the way they think about training, and in turn, building up the athletic potential that I know you guys all have, and in turn, actually being able to create the dream career that you have for your sport. So, just to quickly summarize it up, the goal of this show is to help you create your future instead of just letting life happen to you. And the ways that you can do that, number one, is to have a clear vision of exactly what that future is. Number two is to work on your language and work on your mindset. Stop saying I hope, start saying I will. Stop using that uncertain language of maybe one day I'll be able to get. No, one day I will become this. And then number three is action. When you have that plan, when you have that desire, when you have that goal, every single day you need to wake up and you need to act in alignment with that goal. If you want to be a world champion athlete, you shouldn't be out on the weekends getting drunk, ruining all your progress that you make during the week. You shouldn't be skipping training sessions. You shouldn't be eating fast food 5 times a week. You need to become the person now that becomes that world champion athlete in the future. Because if you don't become that person now, I promise you, those goals won't come true. Now, again, with all of these things, does this mean every single goal you have for your career is for sure going to come true? No, there is still uncertainty with life. But guys, coming right back to the title of this episode, the best way to predict your future is to create it. If you start becoming the person now that you are meant to become, that you want to become later in your life, you are putting yourself in the best possible position to actually become that person in the future. So I appreciate you all for tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time, whether you're listening back later. If you are listening back to this, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, write a review if you're able to, follow along for other content across all social media platforms. The information on how to do that will be in the show notes below. And as always, the biggest ask I have of you guys is share the show out with a friend, share it with a teammate, share it with someone who's going to benefit from hearing this message. So as always, guys, I appreciate you. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the next episode. That was a fun one. All right.